Well, everyone, I think we'll get started. I'll just simply say thank you for attending, and those of you looking at it online later on, thank you for your interest in taking a look at this. We're going to talk a little bit about what we do in IHE radiation oncology. The agenda, what we're going to talk about, talk a little bit about the structure of the committees that are involved in this. We'll talk about profiles, a tiny bit about technical frameworks, take a look at the different types of profiles and what we have active and what work is going on. And then what I consider one of the most important things is how you can get involved to help us out. As I'm probably going to say several times through this presentation, there's always a lot more work than we have people available to do the work. So we welcome any and all to participate and help us out. So what is IHE-RO? It is simply the application of IHE to the radiation oncology clinic. One of our big reasons for doing this, and actually the main reason, is patient safety, to make sure that when we transmit information electronically, that is clearly understood what is being sent and what is being received, and that both systems, that the people using both systems fully understand what the information is, so there's no ambiguity or no misinterpretation. IHE-RO goes back to 2004, so it's been around a while, and we have people that are members of clinical oncology team, physicists, we have industry representatives, and everyone works together and to try to make sure that we get the details right to solve real-world problems. The task force, or actually it's a technical committee that works with the planning committee and develops the integration profiles, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then I work for Philips, so I'm a vendor, but I used to be a clinical medical physicist, and one of my favorite parts about IHE, one of what I think is the most important things that we do, is the connect-a-thon, where vendors sit in a room together and actually pass information back and forth to see if we meet the IHE guidelines. Why is it important? Again, I kind of mentioned that. It is to ensure that information being passed from one manufacturer's system to another manufacturer's system is accurate and clearly understood, so that the patient treatment will be safe and remove as much ambiguity as possible. And then also that the transmission is reliable. And again, the mechanism, the last point that says inter-manufacturer testing, that's again our connect-a-thon. There's also some informal testing that goes on between vendors, because outside of the connect-a-thon, we will coordinate activities with each other and send information back and forth to try to work on things outside of the connect-a-thon. And the needs, and this slide's from Scott Hadley, why do we need IHE-RO? Well, an example is when you talk about HDR source position. It may seem a minor point if you aren't involved in brachytherapy clinically, but what do we mean by source position? Do we mean the middle of the active source? Do we mean the tip of the wire, or what's the location? And it may not seem like much, but in brachytherapy, a few millimeters can be very important when we're determining dose. So this could be a significant source of error if we don't agree on where the source position is. And this is a specific example, but this is generally what we try to do in IHE-RO, is iron out the details. The standards we use are DICOM and HL7 in IHE. IHE-RO focuses mainly on DICOM. And since DICOM is a wider open standard, DICOM tries to work for everybody. But because of that, there's some ambiguity. DICOM may specify several different methods to do something, and you could have one system use the first method and one system receive a second method, and those two still can't talk well to each other. There's not the degree of interoperability we would like. Also, DICOM has a number of tags that are optional, but IHE will take a look at the DICOM standard and refine it. I do want to emphasize IHE doesn't create standards. What it is what I think of it is a refinement of the existing standards. And once again, in IHE-RO, we focus mainly on the DICOM standard and do our best to enhance that. Again, for IHE-RO, the overview of what we focus on is patient care and safety by streamlining the workflow and interoperability. The sponsor now is AAPM. Originally it was ASTRO, but in 2017 AAPM took over sponsorship. ASTRO still is involved, and again, we go back to 2004, so we've been around a little while. IHE-RO has a steering committee, and that's to coordinate the activities, and oversee the activities of the planning and technical committees, and also to be our connection to AAPM leadership. And you can see the secretary and the co-chairs there. Bruce, as you probably know, is a medical physicist, and Bridget is a physician, a radiation oncologist. Then there's the planning committee, and the activities on the planning committee, we try to get vendors involved and people involved. We solicit information. We want to gather what we call use cases. We want to know what the problems are in the real world, what issues there are, so we can attack what's meaningful to the community. We work with the technical committee to prioritize the activities and prioritize the use cases. And we develop educational materials. If you've been to AAPM or ASTRO, you might see people walking around with ribbons. There's sometimes booths, so we also try to give presentations at annual meetings. And the webinar here is also an example of this, where we're trying to reach out and make people aware of what we're doing and where we need help. Planning committee contact information is there. Feel free to contact any of us if you have questions. Mary is the physician co-chair, Alf is the physicist co-chair, and I am the vendor co-chair for the planning committee. And to give credit where credit is due, the technical committee is where a lot of the work happens, where the nitty-gritty happens. The technical committee also tries to recruit vendors and users with technical experience. Also, we want to recruit people who understand the clinical workflow and the clinical environment. And this is where I would like to appeal to people right now. If you're listening to this and you're interested in working with us, we could definitely use more people who have clinical expertise. Doesn't mean you have to work on everything. You could just have one topic or one profile you'd like to help with that's particularly meaningful to you. We welcome that. The technical committee will also take a look at the use cases that the planning committee hands off and take a look and see if it's feasible, if it's covered under something else, or if it's something we really should work on. And then once it's agreed that we should work on it, the technical committee will work together to put together the profile. They also set up the technical framework for the profiles as well and maintain that. Technical committee co-chairs and contact information are here, along with the links to get more information on that. So our profile life cycle. The process really starts with the planning committee, where we gather input from IHE-RO members, the planning committee, technical committee, steering committee. We also reach out as much as we possibly can and welcome input from radiation and oncology community. We'll draft the clinical use cases and clinical impact statements, and then we will vote and rank them in terms of importance and prioritize them. And then we work with the technical committee, and the technical committee will take a look and, like I said, see how feasible it is to do, see if there's a standard that we can refine for the implementation. Sometimes we find that DICOM doesn't fulfill our needs, so a request will go to the DICOM committee to take a look at this topic and see if they can set up the basics for the standards on that. Let me go a little. Then once we decide what should get worked on, the technical committee will draft it. We normally have a champion for each of the profiles who does the major work. Of course, it happens offline because we can't accomplish everything at face-to-face meetings. And there are multiple face-to-face meetings of the technical committee throughout the year, 4 or 5 of them, and they're normally a week long. And if there are change proposals where we think DICOM should be modified in order to allow IHE-RO to do what we need to do, we'll send change proposals back to the DICOM Working Group 7 committee and see if we can get that changed. A lot of the people who are involved in IHE-RO are also on the DICOM committee or have been, Working Group 7, which is radiotherapy. So there's a good relationship between the two and a good degree of coordination. Final draft will be sent out for public comment. Then there's a trial implementation, final, and then it's available for connectathon testing. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then when it's replaced, it's deprecated. And that's from the technical committee. Clinical impact statement talks about, this is before all the work starts, and it simply gives a summary of what we're trying to accomplish with that use case. Rationale, short description, as you see, and then the clinical impact, how we think it's going to make things even better in the hospitals and medical centers. This slide, I say reality, is because we can't do everything that we want to do. We do base our profiles on clinical use cases, that input we get. And there is a priority in weighting process, though. Like I said, we simply cannot do everything. So we try to prioritize what we believe is most critical to the clinical workflow. And then we take a look at what can be addressed. Do we have a standard to support it? Is it really an interoperability problem, or is this something that the vendors should just go fix? How difficult is it to implement? And how will it sell? We can create a bunch of profiles, but if the vendors don't think it really is going to make a difference, or it only makes a difference for a few places, then it's not going to get the adoption that we would like it to see. So it's a balancing act to try to hit the biggest need in the widest application. The last sentence here is the one that's personal for me. It's, in the end, I think it's the perceived demand for a solution that is key to the use case being developed. And of course, like I said, if somebody wants to champion a specific use case, it's much more likely to be dealt with. The clinical user is key to all this because, again, we want to go after what are real problems. The profiles, we have 2 basic types. We have a content that talks about the data, and we have workflow that talks about transactions. And an example of a profile is multi-modality registration 3. Now this deals only with rigid registration, but for RT treatment planning, it does use the DICOM object. And we have actors. These are the things that do the actions. We have a registrator, we have a registered contour, we have a registered display, and a registered dose display. And you might ask, well, why do you have all these separate actors? Because each one of these we consider a separate thing. Creating the registration and the specifications for what to do for that is different than displaying the registration, displaying the image series. So we have defined in the profile each of these items, and you can see the systems we believe that are impacted. And there's another example. This is dose compositing, and it's used to combine dose from 2 or more spatially related 3D dose matrices. We do use, again, the DICOM RT dose instances for this. And here are the actors, and then in the middle are the transactions. And as you take a look at this, you can realize that the profiles get pretty detailed because we have a large number of transactions. We have a fair number of actors in this. This is one of the profiles that I personally really was happy to see us work on, but unfortunately it's not been tested very much in our connectathons. Adoption of this has been a little bit slower than anticipated. And another example of a workflow is the treatment delivery workflow. And again, you can see the two different devices, and those are all the transactions that happen for the workflow between the two. I'll save a comment for a little bit. The current status, this is my best summary of where we are, where we have some retired profiles, we have some completed, some are in process, and identified means we started, but then other things took priority. And when we do that balancing of priorities, some of the things we look at and we decide are more important than something that's being worked on, especially if there's a lot more work to do there. So we shelve some for a while until they come up in priority again. And every year, the technical committee, along with the planning committee, reviews the list of profiles that are being worked on in new ones and the ones that are identified, and decides which one, what's the ranking. So every year we reassess and try to work on whatever is the most important. That said, if we're just a tiny bit away from finishing a profile, we'll finish it. Completed profiles. This is a listing of what these profiles are that are on the prior slide. I'm not going to read each and every one of these. Another one that I'm particularly fond of is quality assurance with plan Veto. This is a newer one that describes interaction between a quality check requester and performer, and it's to force evaluation of treatment data to avoid treatment errors. I particularly like that one. But you can see we have workflow, we have content, and there's more. To be accurate, technical framework is not necessarily the same really as a profile. It's the structure off which everything hangs. All these things you can type in IHE-RO dose compositing or IHE-RO technical framework, and Google will take you to a website that has all these documents. And there's links later on that also will take you to the places where all these are. One thing I wanted to mention briefly to show you how much work can go into some of these things. TPPC, it updates advanced radiotherapy objects and adds more RT treatment techniques. But just to show what ARTI contained, it had definitions for profiles for static beam, MLC beams, arc beams, MLC arc, conformal arc, hard wedge, virtual. You can see the whole list with a misspelling on static electron beam. But all those were specified. Well, they're still there, but now it's even more. And that's because we're trying to keep up with technology. And a couple more completed profiles. We have a bunch in development. We have some that are identified. And we have some that have been retired, but these that have been retired have all been replaced by other ones. It's not been dropped, it's just been simply absorbed and modified into a newer profile. Current issues, we sent a survey last year to AAPM and ASTRO membership. We got 180 individual issues, and between the planning committee and technical committee, we ran through those, summarized them, categorized them, voted on them. They were valued by the technical committee, and right now we're writing clinical impact statements for those and then we'll evaluate where they fit in terms of priority. But I was very, very happy to see the participation of all these different comments. Now, some of these comments were simply a specific vendor issue. It wasn't really an interoperability issue for across vendors, but I still was happy to see all that information. Now we get to the part where I'm going to talk a little bit about the Connect-a-thon. It is a cross-vendor test event. We test all vendors' products in the same place in the same time. Solutions or fixes are often done at night when they're sitting at the desk in the hotel room, and we normally get solutions overnight. Now, that doesn't mean the solutions get into the product yet, because it's got to go through testing in each vendor's process. But We do make progress during the week, and normally it's a week long. Each vendor must test with multiple vendor partners. If you test just one, that's not considered a pass. And I do want to mention, if you do join IHE-RO, there are test tools that are available that you can do testing throughout the year against IHE-RO test tools. It's real-world clinical scenarios, and it's supervised by, I say independent test monitors. By that I mean the judges who sit down and look at this and look at the transactions are not from any company. They're from academic centers. So they hopefully aren't biased. We've had very good cooperation. It's hosted at AAPM Vendor Facilities Academic Centers. You can see the pictures on the left of how much fun it is. It's a bunch of people sitting in a room for 8 to 10 hours a day, just sending information back and forth. This is just instructions for part of the setup for a profile that's deprecated, but I just want to show this to show you the level of detail that goes on here. And again, here's our more details of the profile where things get specified to quite intensely, and then the judging occurs where the producer and the consumer of the information list out, and then the judges will check off or write comments if there's any problems. I just use this to show you that there's a lot of detail that goes on in these. It isn't just simply, oh, it shows up. It's a point-by-point comparison, and that's why I think it's so useful. After the Connect-a-thon, there's a meeting to review the results, and a decision is made on whether or not, and who's ever speaking, can you please mute? Can somebody please mute? We can hear the talking. So after the Connect-a-thon, there's a meeting to decide, review the results, and decide what companies passed what profiles, and then the vendors self-certify by publishing integration statements. And normally you can find these on the vendor website or ask for a copy with your request for purchase. To learn more about Connect-a-thons overall, the 2019 IHE-RO Connect-a-thon will be in Stockholm, Sweden, October 7th to 12th. If you're interested or your company's interested, please reach out to one of the chairs. Excuse me, gentlemen, somebody speaking, can you please mute? North America Connect-a-thons are radiology focused, or actually the other focused on other areas, mainly radiology. IHE-RO does not participate in the North America Connect-a-thon. That's simply because we are so specific in our application that we have a separate system set up that serves as a repository for the information. But if you want information on any of the Connect-a-thons, the North American Connect-a-thons, or in general, you can take a look at the websites. And also, if you want to learn more, there are the webinar series. This is one of them, and you can see the full agenda at the location below. So, how does IHE-RO affect you? And this is my statement. If you ever said, well, why can't those two boxes talk to each other? They're both supposed to be DICOM compliant. Again, IHE-RO might be the answer because it's a refinement of the DICOM. And I keep coming back to this, but the main point of IHE-RO is safety for the patient, safe and effective interoperability. We do try to address real problems. We try to work on what is most important, but we're a limited number of people. So that's why I keep soliciting and keep asking if you're interested at all. We do need to know what problems there are, what issues you have, and we'd love for you to help us solve them. How can you participate? You can join the IHE overall. You can participate in the IHE domains and committees. Technically, it's supposed to be only for members of the organization, but you can be a guest at our meetings and still provide information. Non-members also can participate in the comment periods. So when a profile goes out for public comment, or you can work on implementing the frameworks and there's some links to give you more information on that. Again, if you want to participate in IHE-RO, you can contact any of the people on the earlier slides and ask. We follow the IHE profile lifecycle. It can be 18 to 24 months, maybe even a little longer, depending on if a profile gets shelved to deal with something that we believe is more important. And there are plentiful opportunities, whether you're a member or a non-member of IHE, to participate and help us out. Another way is to let vendors know, and I'm even speaking this as a vendor, but let vendors know you need IHE-RO compliance. So you can ask them what profiles they support, or you can put language in your request for purchase asking about what profiles are supported in IHE. Because the more people that ask about IHE, the more emphasis we get on that. Now, if you want to find more about IHE-RO overall, technical frameworks are at that link. There's a wiki page. You can go there, and it has both. That's the profiles. Or if you go to the wiki, IHE wiki, that's a general one. And there's a general website for IHE. Or again, you can contact the people in the earlier ones. There's the series of webinars, and that's linked there. There's a posting of all the recordings and slide decks online, and that's the link for that. And if you want to sign up for the IHE newsletter, this is IHE in general, there's a link for that. So there's plenty of ways you can get more information. Now, I will admit, this is a little emphatic here. Do you want your interoperability problem solved? I can't guarantee you we will solve them if you join us, but I can guarantee you we'll see what we can do. We'll work on it seriously, especially if you're willing to work with us. So that's my summary of an overview of IHE-RO. And again, if you want to get more information, you can look on the links or ask any of us. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I will say simply thank you for your time, and if you aren't already working with us, I hope you seriously consider it. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.